And right before Biden left for Ohio, he scolded the White House for having a 2-week recess. How dare they go on a break?
Step up, don't you think? Instead of going on a 2-week vacation. 2 weeks. They're walking away. 2 weeks. What are they thinking? My God, this is bizarre.
Railing against a 2-week vacation from a president who has spent around 40% of his presidency on vacation. Yes, Biden hasn't just broken records for illegal immigration. He's also breaking records for number of vacation days on personal overnight trips away from the White House. Also see why they are trying to put his biggest political rival in jail on trumped-up charges, because no amount of mail-in voting and Zuckerbucks is going to save Joe in 2024.
You're watching TrumpFanNetwork, the best channel and all of YouTube.
After the 2016 election, during the presidential transition, I spoke with a number of outgoing Obama administration officials about their surprise at the result of the 2016 election and about the worst case scenario that the country should prepare for. Worst case scenario they could imagine was that the president, the incoming president, Donald Trump, would use the Justice Department as a weapon. That is the single most dangerous thing that a president could do to the country on his own say-so. That was the warning that I got from Obama administration officials when they were on their way out the door.
So how do you reassure them if that is the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by, if he does run, making sure he does not become the next president again.
Would you be running for president if Trump wasn't running?
I expect so, but look, he is running, and I have to run.
In 2017, Donald Trump dropped on D.C. like a nuclear bomb.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. President Obama is the ex-president. And Mr. Trump, for the moment, steps away.
2020 comes around and they hide Hunter Biden's laptop right before an election, only pulling back the curtain after Joe Biden slips into the White House. Now Trump's back on the campaign trail. Nope, says permanent Washington. So a district attorney in New York that almost no one has heard of cobbles together a Frankenstein prosecution to take down his party's biggest political enemy.
So a lot of people are wondering, whoever has this job, are they going to convict Donald Trump?
I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. I was the chief deputy in the Attorney General's office. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times. It'd be hard to argue with the fact that that'd be the most important, most high-profile case. And I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do.
And you believe it should happen?
I believe we have to hold him accountable.
Some of the things that I've seen would have put me in jail. So how is it not going to put someone at his level in jail? Now, I know the answer is he's an old white man and he's got a lot of money. And he was just coming out of the office of president. But that doesn't sit well with me as a citizen of the United States and a resident of, this area.
So yeah, you are right. We got two standards of justice. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein. Being a rich old white man has allowed you to evade accountability in Manhattan. That includes Trump and his children. I've seen a pattern of lawlessness over 20 years. And so I'm inclined to believe all I see in the public domain and know that there's and believe that there's a path forward there to make a case.
Tomorrow, we will see something none of us has ever seen before: the criminal prosecution of a former American president. For the first time, Donald Trump will face a jury of his peers in a case that could carry prison time.
Indictment is an outrage.
Trump's hush money and election interference trial could be the ultimate test of the rule of law and the nature of accountability in this country.
How is it that this ticky-tock type of a case is going to be the first impression that we have as Americans for a president to be indicted?
The
law is the law. Rest assured, Alvin Bragg is not making a mistake. And the team that is behind him, the team that is putting this case together, they're very competent. They know all the facts.
The reason they're doing this is because they know Joe Biden will lose to Donald Trump. They got to get rid of Donald Trump, and that's what this is. And everyone sees what this is.
I think they're just trying to lay out all of Donald Trump's dirty laundry at this point. I think they're trying to establish not only the catch and kill scheme that we saw last week with testimony from David Pecker, now we're getting testimony about exactly how the banking works for Donald Trump and how his check writing actually occurs. There is no evidence of a crime that they have introduced at this point from the prosecution, not even arguably. We're not even talking weight of evidence. We're talking whether evidence suggests that at all.
Writing, their vague allegation about a criminal scheme to corrupt the 2016 presidential election has him more concerned than ever about their unprecedented use of state law and their persistent avoidance of specifying an election crime or a valid theory of fraud. Oh, that's all.
They're very competent. They know all the facts.
It is legal for a candidate to pay a non-disclosure agreement.
This case is not just about hush money, it's about election interference. Pecker confirmed that he bought stories to help Trump defraud voters and win the 2016 election, and Trump covered it up by lying and falsifying business records. But Trump supporters like to ignore that part when they dismiss the charges as nonsense.
How can you possibly say that Trump intended to violate a law that federal election enforcement officials are saying is not a violation?
Not someone who would ever bring a case unless the facts were there. And he's certainly not someone who is motivated by politics. He is motivated by the rule of law, by a commitment to the facts.
It's don't let anybody tell you that this is a strong case or a normal case. This was brought for political reasons. There's no question about it.
The judge is reasonable. He would throw the case out. There is no case there at all. They all constitute, in effect, election interference. None of these cases would have been brought if Trump were not running for president.
The other thing that's happening, the unconstitutional gag order on President Trump. This keeps coming up as a distraction to the American public because they cannot win a case that is absolutely flawed and lacking factual basis to Donald Trump. We know that. This was brought by Michael Cohen. We know that. We know his credibility is minimal, if existent at all.
Pecker did also confirm that he wrote multiple checks, specifically one to Karen McDougal for $30,000 to take her story about her affair with Trump and kill it. And, in case you're wondering, that doesn't necessarily seem illegal, does it? Well, on the surface, no. According to a sidebar conversation that actually took place in the courtroom this week, it is 100% illegal, and it's actually one of the primary charges against Donald Trump.
As honest, objective legal minds have concluded, the underlying conduct alleged, if anything, is a violation of federal campaign finance rules. But one little problem with that. The FEC looked at the case years ago and decided against pursuing it.
So far, things are going very badly for Trump. The prosecution is doing a phenomenal job of making their case.
After a week of testimony, they have yet to present any evidence of anything unlawful.
And thank you to Mr. Pecker for finally being honest about all this.
David Pecker helped Trump more than hurt him. Testifying as National Enquirer buried stories all the time for a whole host of celebrities. So this wasn't just Donald Trump.
Because Trump is not looking so good in front of that jury right now.
These jurors are still wondering, where in the world is the crime here? The answer is there is none, which makes this an egregious abuse of the legal system targeting a political opponent.
So yeah, I would say that Donald Trump has had a pretty horrible week in court. And this is only week one, and we're not even through with the week yet.
If you had a fair judge who's actually knowledgeable about the law, this case would go nowhere but the dustbin of sham prosecutions.
So far, things are going very badly for Trump. The prosecution is doing a phenomenal job of making their case.
I gotta say, we've heard about a week of testimony so far, and I suspect the jury is gonna start demanding pretty soon some direct evidence of criminal activity.
Trump is not looking so good in front of that jury right now.
The prosecution has failed to put on any evidence of indicting President Trump of a crime, of any admissible evidence.
It is 100% illegal, and
it's actually one of the primary charges against Donald Trump.
So far, we have zero evidence, and this trial and the whole intended purpose was to hurt President Trump's election chances has failed. All you have to do is look at the recent polling. Trump is doing quite well in the polls.
Very simple. It says a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the second degree when, with intent to defraud, he makes or causes a false entry in the business records of an enterprise.
Let's talk about something else that nobody's mentioning. Hillary Clinton, with the Russia hoax, paid the FEC a violation for paying her attorneys to hide payments for that. Okay? Now, is she in jail? No. 150%. If it's Trump, they will go after you. If it's anybody else, you pay an $8,000. I believe her fine was $8,000. How's that not a paper crime? If we're going to use this standard, it's got to apply to everybody. And you know what? That's not going to be very pretty for the American people, and that's not going to be pretty for the left-wing Democrats.
That's the false statements of what the money was for that Trump channeled to Cohen for what money Cohen had advanced in the Stormy Daniels matter.
Look, in this case, it wasn't until after the trial began that the DA even identified what their so-called underlying crime is, which is influencing an election through, quote, unlawful means. Where does that come from? A state misdemeanor law, but that doesn't apply to a federal election.
Is a judge that any other situation would likely recuse himself. His daughter had a picture of Trump behind bars as her Twitter profile picture. He donated to Joe Biden's campaign in 2020. Yesterday, it was fascinating. He suddenly decided that Donald Trump can go to his son Barron's graduation on May 17th.
Makes it a felony is if, in addition, his intent to defraud includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof.
It can't be a federal campaign finance violation because Bragg has no authority over that. And besides, the feds already said there ain't no crime here.
Right.
President and the candidate to be the future president being tried for a non-crime. Any reasonable legal scholar who doesn't work for CNN or MSNBC would acknowledge there's just no crime here. That doesn't mean there won't be a conviction. In Alice in Wonderland, you get a conviction.
We'll see what happens, but quite honestly, let's not forget this is an 8-year-old case. The statute of limitations is way past. Nobody brought it until President Trump announced he was running. And this is all based on somebody named Michael. It's a joke.
Well, Professor Dershowitz just said there's no crime here, and when there's no crime there, there's no case. Even Alvin Bragg, when he gets in office, although he campaigned on saying, oh, I went after Trump and I'm going to go after him, even he wouldn't bring the case because there's nothing there.
The Manhattan District Attorney accuses Trump of interfering in the 2016 election by disguising payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels to keep quiet her allegation of a past sexual encounter with Trump as legal expenses.
We had a fraud case that didn't require fraud. Now we have a criminal case that doesn't require crime. The New York bar should be ashamed of itself. The judges are a disgrace. This prosecutor, Bragg, is a joke.
This is sort of like Joseph Stalin. You show me the man, I will show you the crime. This is a case that would never have been brought if the defendant's last name was anything other than Trump. There is no crime here. Non-disclosure agreements are not a crime, nor are they reportable under the federal election laws. There is no precedent for this case.
Alvin is among the most level-headed people I've ever worked with, and he brings that level-headedness to every single thing he does.
You're talking about events that happened 8 years ago. Even many prominent liberal law professors and commentators have said this is a real strain in an unusual case.
So it's a farce.
How is this a fair trial if you can't call people and you can't let the jury know truly the other side of it?
You are entitled, if you're going to be charged with a felony, it's got to be on the basis of an indictment returned by a grand jury that explicitly says what the charge is. The indictment in this case talks about, false bookkeeping in 2017. The case that's being presented to the jury is a conspiracy to violate the federal election laws. It's mind-boggling that it's being permitted.
God,
So he's now disgraced. He's got no reputation. Even New York lawyers are laughing at the guy. How does he pull this off?
He won't. He won't pull this off. He is going to go down as a disgraced DA. And he's going to hurt his political, and he is politically motivated, his Democrat Party. And that's it, bottom line, period, the end.
Really, this trial, I was struck by it last year when I went to cover his arraignment. This really is kind of the end of his quest for Manhattan's approval in particular. Like there is no coming back from this. This is a full rejection of him by Manhattan. And I think for that reason, it's a more personal trial than any of the other trials that he faces.
This is a case, again, this is an indictment in search of a crime. This is a prosecutor who waited 8 years to bring a case on the eve of election, on the eve of the 2024 election. This is a prosecutor who is deeply conflicted. He ran on a platform of going after Donald Trump. There is basically no precedent for a case being brought on this fact situation. Again, I say this as somebody who did not vote for Donald Trump. I did not vote for him in 2016. I did not vote for him in 2020. But what you are seeing is a pattern here of the law being applied to Donald Trump in a way it would not be applied to anyone else.
And he's certainly not someone who is motivated by politics. He is motivated by the rule of law, by a commitment to the facts.
If this looks like a political persecution or political prosecution, it's because it is a political prosecution.
Discuss Alvin Bragg's ongoing show trial against Donald Trump. CNN panelist, network political director David Challen summed up things so far this way.
I've seen precious little evidence presented yet that Trump wasn't floating above. I mean, I've seen very little evidence of Trump's direct involvement in getting this accomplished. So, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. Chris, if things continue on this track in the courtroom, how strong is the potential for a jury to find reasonable doubt over Donald Trump's involvement in what appears to be Alvin Bragg's lawfare scheme and Michael Cohen's conduct?
Well, the case is worthless. It's really a kangaroo court operation. This is Alvin Bragg is contrived and cobbled together bits and pieces of garbage and tries to, use alchemy to turn it into something that it isn't. The problem is the president is sitting in front of a New York jury, and that's the wild card.
Day 11, the Democrats' lawfare trial against Donald Trump. The prosecution bringing in their ninth and biggest witness yet, longtime Trump aide Hope Hicks. And today she testified that she couldn't recall, but says it was possible that she was in a meeting between Donald Trump and David Pecker, a meeting that is critical to Bragg's entire case. And as usual, Donald Trump is blasting the whole thing after court.
The government, DOJ, et cetera, and in particular lately this office of DA, which is letting violent crime run rampant all over our city. These are vicious, radical left lunatics.
And even the liberal media is starting to admit the case is weak.
I mean, I've seen very little evidence of Trump's direct involvement in getting this accomplished. So, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. A lot of that's going to come from Michael Cohen. Prosecutors certainly haven't proven their entire case, their burden out by any stretch of the imagination. But something that certainly has not been established thus far, 8 or 9 days in, is...
Well, if they continue along this vein, there will be an acquittal even by a pro-Democrat anti-Trump jury, okay? Now, remember, everyone said they could be fair, but just about everybody hates Donald Trump. I mean, that's on this jury. And then today we had Hope Hicks. Hope Hicks didn't lay a finger on Donald Trump. So we're in day 11 with a ninth witness, and nobody has touched Donald Trump. So what this tells me is that Michael Cohen is the key here. And Trump and his lawyers will destroy him. I think there's something very important to go back to, and it's a fundamental. The people have the obligation to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 people. It's got to be a unanimous verdict. And if there is an explanation other than what the prosecution suggests, that is reasonable doubt right there.
I tend to agree with the judge in one big aspect. The jury, this will get to a jury at some point. Thus far, what I've read in the public narrative, there's nothing that that says there was a crime. There's some embarrassing things and salacious things, but there's nothing criminal here.